Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, cloning was a scorching hot news topic. Though we don't agree on mostly anything these days, back then there were legitimate reasons for vehement opinions on both sides, as the ability to clone pets and humans began to feel eerily reachable. Naturally, Hollywood stepped in to do what Hollywood does best. They gave us a humorous but sneakily deep-thinking sci-fi action flick about all of the discourse surrounding cloning, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he almost died making it. This is the story of what the fuck happened to the Sixth Day. When husband and wife writing duo Marianne and Cormac Wibberley sold the second script that they'd ever written to Disney to break onto the scene, they were shocked by how quickly they'd been typecast as family movie writers. So they decided to write an action movie sample to prove to the studios that they were capable of exploring other genres as well. That script, titled The Sixth Day, would change their lives. It ended up jump-starting a career that would include the duo working on hits like National Treasure and Bad Boys 2, amongst others. The sixth in The Sixth Day was originally spelled out like a rational adult would assume. However, it was changed by the studio out of fear that the majority of the public were brainless human meat popsicles unable to decipher from M. Night Shyamalan's uber hit The Sixth Sense.
I see dead people.
Regardless, the script found the desk of Phoenix Pictures chairman Mike Medavoy. The studio had previously brought us films like U-Turn, Urban Legend, and Lake Placid, and was over the moon with what they'd read. Impressed by the way the script incorporated humor and action, the studio optioned the script, but there was one problem. They had never really made a movie like this before. And so Medavoy smartly reached out for the help of a sci-fi action producer, John Davison, who had films like RoboCop and Starship Troopers under his belt.
Come on, you want to live forever?
Sony Pictures Releasing came aboard to distribute the film, and we were off to the races. At director, the studio ultimately went with the experienced Roger Spottiswoode, just a few years removed from the Pierce Brosnan GoldenEye follow-up Tomorrow Never Dies.
I have to admit, though, we seem to have developed a certain attachment to each other.
Although it had to be at least somewhat alarming that Spottiswoode also helmed Stop or My Mom Will Shoot.
Nobody hurts my baby.
Which Schwarzenegger famously tricked Stallone into starring in, knowing what the outcome would be for Stallone. But I digress. An alternate multiverse features Gremlins and the Howling legend Joe Dante helming the project. In a 2009 Reddit AMA, an Arnold Schwarzenegger fan, who isn't, asked Dante if he'd ever worked with the actor, and Dante responded that he had almost worked with him on The Sixth Day, but that Schwarzenegger was quote-unquote wrong for the part.
Talk to the hand.
I imagine he's referring to the idea that the script, though it had both True Lies and Total Recall elements, called for a bewildered everyman thrust into a dangerous situation. Arnold is anything but an everyman, but to be fair, they at least dressed him in dad khakis for most of the film. I would also argue that I'd cast the Austrian oak in any role that he was willing to play, ever, which they did. He also helped produce. Arnold, along with his $25 million price tag, was set to play the character of Adam Gibson, a family man and business owner who ends up wrapped in a billionaire's human cloning conspiracy. One day, the happy-go-lucky Adam shows up to his surprise birthday party to see another version of himself in his home, kissing his wife and eating his birthday cake.
There's someone in my house eating my birthday cake with my family, and it's not me.
He's informed that this was a mistake, but unfortunately, he's now seen his clone and has to be killed. If his family finds out, they too will be eliminated in the name of the future of human cloning. Arnold has to then take down the entire industry to get his life back, eventually teaming up with his own clone, and at one point using a severed finger to access proprietary information. The rest of the cast features an "oh shit, he's in this movie too" moment at every turn. On the good guy side of things, Michael Rapaport plays Adam's bachelor buddy and co-worker Hank. Air Force One's Wendy Crewson is cast as Adam's extremely loving wife Natalie, who brings him stogies and does husband and wife stuff with him in their garage minivan. The bad guys are led by ghost actor Tony Goldwyn as Michael Drucker, who gives an impressively believable evil Steve Jobs-like performance as a heartless corporate figurehead playing God.
The extremists don't like to admit that they'd rather the world went hungry than eat cloned fish, so instead they keep yelling about human cloning.
Drucker's street general is played by none other than the legend Michael Rooker as Robert Marshall, barking orders and threatening folks at every turn with his patented, tired of your shit voice.
I told him to hide it, so I wouldn't know where it is.
We'll see about that, won't we?
Yeah, we will.
Even his henchmen are notable, with Terry Crews appearing in his debut role as the literal Muscle. Crews appears on screen alongside fun performances from Sarah Winter and Rodney Rolland as a couple of cyberpunk clones with low morals, who look as if they came straight from the set of Hackers. A lot of these characters are fun but surface-level action archetypes until we reach Robert Duvall as Dr. Griffin Weir, a good person at heart, tortured by his past decisions. Yeah, you heard that right, Robert fucking Duvall, who Schwarzenegger specifically recruited into the role, knowing the kind of heart that he would inject into the project.
Don't start.
I am so sorry.
Don't start! Don't start! Don't start!
The Sixth Day was originally set to take place 20 to 30 years into the future, but plans were changed when the world caught up to the script's technology quicker than expected. As the film was moving forward, so were the news headlines around the topic of human cloning. The birth of Dolly the sheep, the first mammal to ever be successfully cloned, that we know of at least, was announced in 1997. Which led to then-President Bill Clinton banning federal funding for human cloning that same year. The decision was made to circumvent the original plans and base the Canada shot film a mere 15 years into the future, landing us in 2015, the same year that Back to the Future Part 2 takes place, by the way. While we don't have hoverboards or time travel, the Sixth Day was able to kind of anticipate some of our current technology. For the self-driving cars, Arnold says that they went to General Motors and asked for their future prototypes. This resulted in them supplying $15 million of futuristic vehicles, which were transported in heated trailers. There's a helicopter that turns into somewhat of a jet called a Whispercraft, weighing in at a whopping 7,000 pounds and featuring a working dashboard, though it wasn't actually flyable. The rig was created by the designer of the human spaceship from Alien, Ron Cobb. The Demolition Man-esque laser guns, lovingly dubbed the Foosh guns, were created by special effects supervisor Michael Lantieri by filling the barrel with water and calcium carbide so that when fired, a gas was released and ignited by glow plugs, creating a light effect. Most impressively, and as it turns out accurate, Arnold at one point uses an interactive smart fridge in his kitchen. Something I still can't afford in 2025, but by God they exist. One mustn't forget Hank's dream girlfriend, a switch-on, switch-off hologram that wants to watch sports with you, loves that you go straight to your chair after work, and even unzips your pants for you.
Darling, where are you?
Hi, sugar.
On the ugly side of things, there is what's supposed to be a futuristic doll called a SimPal that actually looks like someone should take it back to the evil Dark Ages and burn it with fire. The SimPal has a hilarious amount of screen time in The Sixth Day, with the movie hellbent on making the probably satanic doll suffer at every turn. Seriously, look at this thing. Which, incidentally, if you're a big weirdo who wants Jeffrey Dahmer's Annabelle sitting on your kitchen island, well, you can currently purchase one of these on-screen used props on eBay for $3,500. Just know that you're being judged by us.
Sing
Go to sleep,
songs.
Cindy.
Would you like to sing with me?
Go to sleep.
To create all these effects, some of which haunting and unfortunate, the production had originally planned on filming 300 special effects shots, which throughout pre-production quickly ballooned to 700, with the project now sporting a budget of $82 million, which when adjusted for inflation would be about $150 million today. According to visual effects supervisor Peter Curran, the Infusion Lab alone took 3 months to create, with 2 crews often working day and night. The lab featured 85,000 and 32,000 gallon water tanks, both filled with 86-degree water. They did this to make it more palatable for a scene in which Arnold would hide in the tanks from his assailants. The water may have been comfortable, but the scene almost took the beloved actor from us for good. The scene was first rehearsed with goggles on, and all the appropriate precautions appeared to have been taken. However, when Arnold went to film without the goggles on, the water was too milky for him to see, and when he went to depart the water, he realized he didn't know where to get out and was trapped. Thankfully, his stunt double, Billy Lucas, saw him struggle and helped him get to safety. In a Reddit AMA 11 years ago, Arnold recalled the moment as one of the closest that he had ever been to death, also recalling the horse on the rooftop moment from True Lies, unsurprisingly. Speaking of early deaths, the first moments of the film feature a much brighter future for Vince McMahon's XFL Football League. The moment is one of the 6 days' most underrated oddities, showing a future in which the XFL wasn't a dumpster fire that only survived a year, but was rather a super successful one in which players were paid millions in front of thousands of adoring fans. When a $1 million quarterback with an unexpected career-ending injury is secretly murdered and quickly cloned to start the next weekend, it's another interesting look into how billionaires could use the power of cloning for nefarious purposes. Who thinks of this stuff? You know, I bet Jerry Jones would do it. The 6th Day certainly seemed like a movie that spared no expense, and had a lot of fun doing so. While the bold, futuristic ideas and classic Arnold moments make for what I consider a pretty fun and underrated flick, critics simply didn't agree. To make matters worse, audience did not show up. The film was considered a box office flop, making only $96 million on an $80 million budget. Ultimately, it opened up behind How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Rugrats in Paris, and Charlie's Angels. Ultimately, a very bad sign for Arnold's career at the time. For reference, Arnold's previous film, the very underrated horror flick End of Days, had managed to pull in over $300 million at the box office just 1 year prior. Though Roger Ebert liked the film and gave it 3 out of 4 stars, Arnold received multiple Razzie nominations, including Worst Actor. Cheekily, he was also nominated for Worst Supporting Actor as his own clone, and Worst Screen Couple for his performance with himself, which I'll openly say is horse dung because these two were adorable together.
Cool.
Thankfully, this was the same year that Battlefield Earth came out, so he was a loser here. On the bright side, the film was nominated for a few Saturn Awards, including Best Actor, Best Sci-Fi Film, Best Special Effects, and Best Makeup. Though it didn't win any of the awards, it's still nice to be noticed. Ultimately, who knows why The Sixth Sense didn't hit with audiences despite its humor, ideas, and action. Perhaps they were unwilling to participate in anything that reminded them of old-school 90s action movies at the dawn of the 2000s. Or it could have been, in part, the corny poster featuring this confusing monstrosity, as Arnold was reticent to hold a gun due to ongoing strife about gun violence in his movies. Regardless, if you happen to be nostalgic for an Arnold throwback, or want to check out the wild ideas around the horrors of human cloning through the lens of a sci-fi blockbuster with jokes, this one is a lot more fun than it was being given credit for back in 2000. And that, my friends, is what the fuck happened to The Sixth Day.
We all know Arnold Schwarzenegger terminated the 1980s as the premier action movie star alongside Stallone. But what about the 90s? Beyond Total Recall, T2 Judgment Day, and True Lies, what's the best Arnie action flick released between 1990 and 1999? And when we mean best, we don't mean box office success. We're talking about old school, ass-kicking Schwarzenegger action hinting at the halcyon days that date back to Commando and Conan the Barbarian. Is it Last Action Hero? End of Days? Or is it Chuck Russell's underrated 1996 conspiracy espionage thriller, Eraser? If you said Junior, Jingle All the Way, or Batman and Robin, you may kindly show yourselves out the door this instant. Better yet, stick around. Eraser is about to wipe your memory and prove why it's the last great Arnie action flick to blast the masses in the 1990s. From the rocky relationship between producer and director, multiple script rewrites, expensive costs and last-minute casting decisions to filming the awesome action sequences, introducing the high-tech railgun, obscure in-movie references, media spin-offs, and a ridiculous 2022 reboot, it's time to reflect on the most expensive movie of 1996 and ask point-blank, what the happened to Eraser? Okay, so a quick plot rundown will help explain one of the biggest trivial tidbits about Eraser. Schwarzenegger stars in the movie as U.S. Marshal John Kruger, aka Eraser, a witness protection agent specializing in eliminating, or erasing, the identities of key eyewitnesses who could testify against organized criminals in court. When Kruger is assigned to erase a whistleblowing employee named Lee Cullen, he becomes entangled in a vast conspiratorial web of deceit involving the Cyrez Corporation and its development of a high-tech railgun. Now, in the original script, the Cyrez Corporation was named Cyrex. However, a Texas-based microprocessing company named Cyrex, one of Intel's main rivals, protested all references to Cyrex and had to be removed after the movie was shot. Not only were verbal references to Cyrex altered with post-dubbing, but all visual signposts for the Cyrex Corporation had to be digitally erased, a costly process in 1996. Still, some scenes retained the abbreviation CYX, an obvious reference to Cyrex before it was changed to Cyrez. Speaking of costly processes, it's worth noting up front that Eraser was the most expensive Hollywood movie of 1996, along with Disney's The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Produced by Ann and Arnold Coppelson and distributed by Warner Brothers, Eraser boasted a $100 million budget headed into principal photography in 1995. Before detailing the filming process, more about Eraser's casting and development is necessary. For instance, while horror heads will always know Chuck Russell for his work on A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, and the killer remake of The Blob, the director catapulted into the mainstream following the massive success of Jim Carrey's The Mask, setting Russell up as a major Hollywood player. Meanwhile, Schwarzenegger was in transition himself after the notorious flop Last Action Hero, and a deliberate shift to more comedic family fare with Junior and Jingle All the Way. In the mid-90s, Russell and Schwarzenegger were busy collaborating on a different project when Eraser was sent their way. After reading the script, Russell felt Arnie was perfect for the role of John Kruger, stating, quote, "I see Arnold the way a lot of people do, as a mythic, bigger-than-life character, and that's who Kruger is. The character and the scenario are based firmly in reality, but I like the mythic proportions of this man, with a strong sense of duty, a strong sense of honor, who will literally do anything to protect a noble witness. I was excited about doing a film that had heroic proportions," end quote. Despite Russell feeling Arnie was right for the role, Sylvester Stallone was offered the part before Schwarzenegger was cast. Yet Stallone hated the Eraser script so much that he instantly declined the role and opted to star in Copland instead. Of course, Sly and Schwartz would cross cinematic paths more than a decade later with The Expendables and Escape Plan. Speaking of Stallone, Eraser fans may notice how similar Alan Silvestri's score is to his musical arrangements for Judge Dredd, Stallone's cult classic Misfire released 1 year earlier. Although Tony Puryear and Waylon Green are credited for the screenplay, several writers were hired to rework the Eraser script. John Milius did uncredited script work as a personal favor to Arnie following their work on Conan. Frank Darabont, Graham Yost, and William Wisher were recruited midway through production to iron out the story problems. Wisher co-wrote The Terminator and T2 Judgment Day with James Cameron, making him a familiar fit with Arnie. According to the Making of documentary, Arnie had his hands in every creative department. As a bona fide movie star and shrewd businessman, Arnie had an imprint on the marketing, ads, music, stunt choreography, and emphasis on the story to ensure the utmost tension and suspense. Far from a mere actor, Arnie deserves credit as a filmmaker and storyteller who contributed a lot to Eraser behind the scenes. Apart from Arnie's role, other actors were considered for Lee Cullen before singer and actress Vanessa Williams was cast. While Arnie's wife Maria Shriver recommended Williams to the Coppelsons, Brooke Shields was offered the role but had to decline due to scheduling issues. Megan Follows was also briefly considered before former Miss America Williams was paired with former Mr. Universe Schwarzenegger. As for U.S. Marshal Robert DeGuerin, Jonathan Pryce was considered before James Caan was cast in a rare mainstream blockbuster. According to Khan, he and Arnie got along quite well while making Eraser, stating, quote, "Arnold and I had fun. We did that macho stuff, but we were always poking fun at it too," end quote. Before the role of mobster Johnny Castiglione was given to Robert Pastorelli, everyone from Robin Williams, Rick Moranis, and Dan Aykroyd to Terrence Hill, Bud Spencer, and Gene Wilder were considered. However, nothing was more important than casting the right lead, which producer Arnold Compilation knew Schwarzenegger was right for. According to Compilation, "For many years, Arnold and I have talked about working together. I knew that Eraser was the perfect project for him. When Arnold committed to the title role, I was thrilled. That thrilling feeling was reinforced each day of the production as I watched him perform. Working with Arnold has been one of the most pleasurable experiences of my filmmaking career," end quote. Although working with Arnie was pleasant, Compilation did not get along well with Chuck Russell while making Eraser. Communications virtually ceased between the two, requiring Schwarzenegger to mediate on set. Russell and Compilation would speak to Arnie separately and organize the logistics of the shooting schedule on their behalf. The fact that Eraser became a success is downright remarkable considering the director and producer had difficulty working together and hardly spoke while making the movie. Speaking of the making, Eraser entered principal photography on September 13th, 1995, and wrapped on March 31st, 1996. The 6-month film shoot began in New York. For a certain scene set in Queens, the production team built an identical, full-scale model of a real house in the area just to be exploded on camera. Additionally, many scenes were conceived with sets built and lit, but were never filmed. This contributed to the $100 million budget, as did one scene requiring a combination of animatronic, CGI, and live alligators to create what producers called crocogators for their hybrid qualities. To wit, a romantic ending between Kruger and Cullen was filmed but discarded and replaced with reshot footage when it tested poorly. The New York Zoo sequence set inside the reptile house was filmed across the country on a Warner Brothers Studios soundstage in Burbank, California. The iconic locale presented a full circle moment for Schwarzenegger, who famously filmed a scene at Griffith Observatory in The Terminator, a sequence revisited from a different perspective in Terminator Genisys. For the aerial action, Arnie was fitted into roughly 10 flying apparatuses for 1 week of filming. One of the most trying sequences to film included Kruger having to eject from a jet flying at ultra-high 250 mph speed. According to Russell, the sequence was patched together through piecemeal editing, stating, quote, "These things are jigsaw puzzle pieces not only within shooting the sequence, but within each shot. You had elements that were live action, elements that were miniature, sometimes computer generated, and they're all married together in the final processing," end quote. As usual, Schwarzenegger performed many of his stunts in the film, as did Williams, including when Kruger falls from roughly 65 feet in the air and performs a mid-air backflip. The scene took 7 takes to nail, with skillful editing and VFX making it appear like Kruger drops down straight past the flaming jet engine in one unbroken sequence. As for the gnarly sniper shot through the rifle scope and eyeball on the docks at the end of the film, many have noticed how it is nearly identical to a scene from RoboCop 2, down to the head sniper's precise head movements. However, it's more of an overt reference to Carlos Hathcock, a notorious US sniper during the Vietnam War who famously killed an enemy the same way. On a more trivial note, it's worth noting that Schwarzenegger does not utter his famous cinematic catchphrase, "I'll be back," made popular in the Terminator franchise. However, Kruger does respond to a colleague saying, "I'll be right out," during an intense action sequence. Aside from being one of Schwarzenegger's last box office action hits, Eraser's most lasting legacy is introducing the world to the railgun, the crucial, high-tech military-grade weapon that incites the plot. Lee Cullen is put in grave danger after warning the FBI that the Cyrus Corporation has created the railgun for mass consumption. According to Russell and Schwarzenegger, it was paramount for the filmmakers to create a menacing weapon rooted in reality. As Russell states, quote, "Railguns are hyper-velocity weapons that shoot aluminum or clay rounds at just below the speed of light. In our film, we've taken existing stealth technology one step further and given them an X-ray scope sighting system. These guns represent a whole new technology and weaponry that is still in its infancy, though a large-scale version exists in limited numbers on battleships and tanks. They have an incredible range. They can pierce 3-foot-thick cement walls and then knock a canary off a tin can with absolute accuracy. In our film, one contractor has finally developed an assault-sized railgun. We researched this quite a bit, and the technology is really just around the corner, which is one of the exciting parts of the story, end quote. Schwarzenegger weighed in, adding, quote, "We paid a lot of attention to making the audience feel the danger of this weapon, that anyone can be outside of your house, looking right through the walls. It really leaves you nowhere to hide. But on top of that, we show the sophistication of the weapon in a lot of fun ways. You not only see through a building, you see a person's skeleton and even their heart beating inside. There are some great visual effects there," end quote.
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our JoBlo channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
The railgun was loosely featured in the obscure PC video game Eraser Turnabout, an early full-motion video rail shooter released in 1997. The weapon spawned an entire genre of rail shooters that relied on firearms that operated using electricity rather than bullets. One example includes the shock rifle featured in Unreal Tournament, the 1999 rail shooter inspired by Eraser. The US military created the railguns in real life, although they were originally meant to be fitted on naval ships rather than for personal use. The same railgun featured in Eraser can be spotted in Spielberg's Ready Player One, a gigantic cinematic Easter egg full of pop culture references. There was also an Eraser novelization by Robert Tyne, published in 1996. The final credits play the song "Where Do We Go From Here?" performed by Vanessa Williams. Despite its high cost of production, Eraser wiped out the box office competition when it blasted theaters in June 1996. The film grossed an impressive $242 million internationally, marking one of Schwarzenegger's last bona fide hit action movies. Before the film opened theatrically, Schwarzenegger premiered Eraser in Video Village at the 1996 Summer Olympic Games in Atlanta, Georgia, ahead of a Goo Goo Dolls concert. More trivially, Eraser was among the first motion pictures released on DVD when Warner Bros. Home Entertainment offered it in December 1996. Although Eraser's commercial success did not warrant an immediate sequel starring the Schwarz, the poor and unnecessary Eraser Reborn quickly came and went in 2022. The silly sequel opened theatrically in Germany before going straight to video elsewhere. And that's what the fuck happened to Eraser. The project came about while Russell and Schwarzenegger were busy working on another movie. It required multiple revisions from high-profile screenwriters and necessitated Arnie to mediate between Russell and producer Arnold Schwarzenegger after they did not get along well. Filming occurred on the East and West Coasts, using studio sets and real locations, often combining live action with early CGI. Yet, Eraser will likely be remembered most for introducing the world to the electromagnetic railgun, a high-tech weapon proliferating in pop culture in the past 3 decades. Almost 30 years later, Eraser may also remain Schwarzenegger's most financially successful last action hero movie ever. Arnold Schwarzenegger's follow-up to the incredible success of Terminator 2, Last Action Hero, was supposed to be something special. A movie that would add another awesome action spectacle to Schwarzenegger's filmography while also evoking the wonder of kid-friendly classics like E.T. and The Wizard of Oz. Instead, it was a bomb, best remembered for its messy development process, bad marketing decisions, and squandered potential. But is Last Action Hero really a bad movie? Let's dig into it and find out with this episode of Revisited. Zach Penn and Adam Leff were fresh out of college when they sat down to write a screenplay called Extremely Violent. A satire of the action genre, their script skewered the cliche by dropping an action movie fan into the middle of the mayhem. Imagine if the Randy character from Scream had found himself inside one of his favorite horror movies instead of being attacked by a slasher in his own reality. Extremely Violent centered on a young kid named Danny, who's grieving the death of his father. But rather than face his pain, he tries to push it aside and distract himself through entertainment. When he goes to see a special screening of a new action movie called Extremely Violent, He escapes into a movie in a more literal way than he ever imagined. He finds himself transported into the film, becoming the action hero's sidekick, dodging bullets and riding shotgun during chase scenes. And since he is so familiar with the formula of action movies, he's always several steps ahead of the story and the hero. Speaking with Empire magazine, Penn confirmed that he and Leff did their homework, making sure their movie within a movie would play just like the action flicks that could be found in the nearest video store. He said, quote, "We rented every action movie we could think of and made a checklist. Does the second most evil bad guy die before or after the most evil bad guy? Does the hero have a Vietnam buddy? It was fun, although watching Steven Seagal movies one after another can be soul-crushing," unquote. Penn and Leff wrote the script with one particular action hero in mind, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Their inspiration is obvious in the name they gave the action hero, Arno Slater. They didn't really expect that their script would get made into a movie that would star Schwarzenegger, but then Schwarzenegger actually signed on to the project. Unfortunately for them, the movie that ended up being made with their ideal star in the lead isn't what Penn and Leff wrote. The title was changed to The Last Action Hero, and the hero's name was changed to Jack Slater. And nearly everything else was changed along the way. Last Action Hero only resembles extreme violence in the basics. It is about a kid named Danny who has lost his dad and is a fan of action movies, getting pulled into a movie and becoming a sidekick to his favorite hero. But from the explanation for how Danny gets into the movie to the adventure he and Jack Slater go on, it's all different from what Penn and Leff wrote. Schwarzenegger felt the extremely violent script was too violent. And why wouldn't it be? Violence was promised right there in the name. He also felt the script wasn't written on a professional level, which could make sense from his perspective, since he was used to seeing scripts from Hollywood's top writers, and this one was written by two beginners. So Columbia Pictures hired one of those top writers to revise the script, Shane Black, who had written Lethal Weapon and recently sold the script for The Last Boy Scout for just under $2 million. Penn and Leff found it amusing that the writer of some of the action movies that had given them moments to satirize in their script was now reworking their script. Black was aided by his friend David Arnott while doing the revisions, and Black and Arnott changed the script so substantially they ended up earning the screenplay credit on the finished film, while Penn and Leff only received story credit. Last Action Hero isn't exactly what Black and Arnott wrote either. More writers worked on the script after they were finished, which is somewhat surprising given that John McTiernan, who had worked with both Schwarzenegger and Black on Predator, signed on to direct Last Action Hero. McTiernan was such a fan of Black's writing, he had given Black an acting role in Predator in hopes that he would touch up the script while they were on set. Something Black has said he didn't actually do. But he wasn't quite satisfied with what Black and Arnott had written for Last Action Hero, so he called in some other script doctors, like Larry Ferguson, who had worked with on The Hunt for Red October. The script was polished by Star Wars star and postcards from the Edge writer Carrie Fisher, who did a lot of script doctor work in the 90s. And William Goldman, the Oscar-winning writer of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and All the President's Men, was paid $1 million to tinker with the script for 4 weeks. Despite all the changes that were being made and the money that was being spent, it was clear that Last Action Hero wasn't shaping up to be what anyone was hoping it would be. After extensive rewrites had been done, Black was even asked to come back and work on the script some more. He declined. McTiernan was running out of time to worry about the script anyway. Columbia Pictures had already announced a June 18, 1993 release for Last Action Hero, a date that was just 9.5 months away from when they gave the film a green light. Now McTiernan had just had to get this thing done and ready for its premiere. The release date Columbia chose was 1 week after Universal was going to release Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park. But the studio wasn't concerned. Spielberg's previous movie had been the critical and financial disappointment Hook, which Carrie Fisher also worked on as a script doctor. They took Hook's reception as a sign that the days of Spielberg movies being a big deal were over. They believed that Last Action Hero was going to be a juggernaut that would easily crush Jurassic Park. They were mistaken. A lot has been said over the decades about the rewrites ruining Last Action Hero, but some of the changes were actually improvements. In the original script, Danny ends up inside the movie because he's being toyed with by a demon. The projectionist in the theater is an ancient evil being who is trying to manipulate the kid into becoming a vengeful killer. The point of putting him through the action movie scenario is to get Danny to shoot the projectionist when he returns to his own reality. And then, supposedly, the demon would claim his soul. The rewrites turned the reality-bending adventure into something that's just fun. There's emotional weight to Danny and Jack's interactions, and of course they both learn lessons from the time spent with each other. But there are no demons and no souls at stake. Danny ends up in the movie, the latest entry in his beloved Jack Slater franchise, because he has a magic ticket. A ticket given to him by the friendly old projectionist Nick, played by Robert Prosky. This ticket has passed through the hands of the world's greatest magicians, and was given to Nick by Harry Houdini. It was said to be a passport into another world, and that turns out to be true. No indication that he had the right sensibility for the material. He was a maker of serious action movies, not genre-skewering parodies. They had imagined someone like the Blues Brothers and An American Werewolf in London director John Landis directing the film, or Robert Zemeckis, the director of Used Cars, Romancing the Stone, and Back to the Future. Someone they knew would have fun deconstructing action cliches. As Penn said, quote, "It's easier for someone from the outside to mock the conventions of action movies than it is for the people who created them in the first place," unquote. McTiernan has admitted that his movie struggles to find the right tone. He wanted it to be a mixture of action and the heartwarming feel of E.T., but he had trouble achieving that. The movie's struggle with tone is clear in the scene set in the world of Jack Slater 4. The idea had been that Danny would be in a straightforward action movie along the lines of Lethal Weapon, and the action movie would then become comedic because the kid knows so much about the genre. Instead, McTiernan and the script doctor sent Danny into a world that's already a parody of Hollywood films. The movie world comes off like a live-action cartoon, and it's not even entirely live-action, because one of Jack's fellow police officers is an animated cat, Whiskers, voiced by Danny DeVito. The characters aren't just inside one movie, it's like they're living in the world of every major studio film that had ever been released. There are some cute jokes along the way, the most popular being when Danny realizes that Sylvester Stallone starred in Terminator 2 in the world of Jack Slater 4. And the movie still remembers to make a mockery of some action movie cliches, like Jack's always angry and screaming superior Decker, played by Frank McRae, and the traitorous friend, played by F. Murray Abraham. But the humor goes so far over the top, you can tell the filmmakers strayed from the point along the way. The action is fun, but in a ridiculous way. There's even a sequence built around the funeral of a gangster called Leo the Fart.
He's a good man. A flatulent man.
Whose corpse has been packed full of nerve gas, ensuring he'll be exiting the world with a deadly case of flatulence. That was a Shane Black edition. There's never a serious element to the action sequences in the Jack Slater 4 reality. There's no danger. Jack Slater is supernaturally strong and capable, but he loses some of his ability when he enters Danny's reality in the second half of the film. In that world, he can get hurt. Here's where the magic ticket brings more entertainment into the movie, as he ends up in the hands of an assassin called Mr. Benedict, a William Goldman edition brought to the screen through a scenery-chewing, fourth-wall-breaking performance from Charles Dance. Benedict realizes he can use the ticket to pass into another world, one where he can get away with more evil deeds as they go unnoticed in Danny's harsh reality. His first scheme is to assassinate Arnold Schwarzenegger at the Jack Slater 4 premiere. To pull this off, he pulls another villain out of the Jack Slater franchise, the Ripper, an axe-wielding serial killer who was played by Tom Noonan in Jack Slater 3, a character who even managed to kill Jack's young son in that film's tragic ending. Noonan plays a great creep, and the fact that Jack lost a son brings an interesting dynamic to his dealings with Danny, who lost his dad. McTiernan and the writers could have played up the surrogate father and son element more than they did. For a movie that gets so absurd at times, Last Action Hero becomes surprisingly grounded in the end. While Benedict toys with the idea of bringing cinematic icons like Dracula, King Kong, and Freddy Krueger into Danny's world, and something like that did happen in some drafts of the script, he doesn't go ahead with it. We can only imagine what could have been. the movie wraps up simply, with 2 rooftop confrontations back to back. Jack faces off with the Ripper, then he faces off with Benedict. There's not much to it. But we do see Jack succeed in saving Danny's life in a situation just like the one where he failed to save his son's life. And it's harrowing enough to leave Jack seriously wounded, so it works. The magic ticket shenanigans allow for a fun moment where Jack Slater and Arnold Schwarzenegger come face to face. And Jack makes it clear that he's not fond of the actor who has put him through hell just by making movies. Better than that, the magic ticket brings death out of the Ingmar Bergman film The Seventh Seal, just as Jack is on the verge of dying. Danny and Jack get to talk to death, and it's a great cameo for Ian McKellen. Shane Black has said that the casting of Danny in Last Action Hero was, quote, one of the absolute misfires of Western culture, unquote. But child actor Austin O'Brien actually did well with the material he was given. Danny is a good stand-in for members of the generation of kids who grew up watching the action movies of the 80s and 90s. If you're a movie fan of a certain age, you might see some of yourself reflected in his character. A kid who would prefer a Schwarzenegger version of Hamlet over a faithful adaptation. Last Action Hero features some good supporting turns from Anthony Quinn as Benedict's boss, who isn't nearly the threat his henchman is, Art Carney, in his final film role as Jack's ill-fated cousin. Mercedes Ruehl as Danny's mother, who bonds with Jack when he follows Danny home, and an underused Bridget Wilson as Jack's daughter Whitney. It's also nice to see Professor Toru Tanaka in there as a villainous bodyguard. Screenwriter Zach Penn earned his Screen Actors Guild membership when he was offered a small role as a police officer, but you probably won't spot him in the movie. He had been on set for a couple weeks before he realized that he was being positioned outside of the frame for all of his scenes. The film does feature an onslaught of largely unnecessary and pointless cameos from the likes of Sharon Stone, Robert Patrick, Little Richard, Tina Turner, Jim Belushi, and Damon Wayans. Jean-Claude Van Damme gets a moment. Chevy Chase shows up just long enough to almost get knocked down. But other than Ian McKellen as Death, the best cameo in the film is the appearance by Schwarzenegger's then-wife Maria Shriver, who was embarrassed to see her husband promote Planet Hollywood on the red carpet. Post-production on Last Action Hero was a rushed process that was made even more complicated when a test screening was held. The audience's reaction was so negative, it was considered a disaster. The decision was made to reshoot the ending, and by the time the additional photography was finished, they were only 3 weeks away from the release date Columbia refused to budge from. They were going to take on Jurassic Park, and attempted to do so by hyping Last Action Hero as the greatest action movie ever made. Studio chairman Mark Canton called the film the best thing he had ever done. Schwarzenegger was confident he had made another summer blockbuster. A promotional tie-in with Burger King was secured. A toy line was created, and Schwarzenegger insisted that the Jack Slater action figure not have a weapon. A soundtrack was assembled that featured the likes of AC/DC, Anthrax, Megadeth, Alice in Chains, Def Leppard, Aerosmith, Cypress Hill, Fishbone, Queensryche, Tesla, and Buckethead. For no reason other than extravagance, the studio paid to have the title of the movie painted on the side of an unmanned rocket that NASA was launching into space. Due to a glitch, that rocket didn't even get off the ground until months after the movie was released. Columbia also placed a 75-foot-tall balloon of Schwarzenegger holding dynamite in the middle of Times Square. Given that this was immediately after the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, the dynamite was considered to be in poor taste, so that balloon was quickly deflated. Jurassic Park reached theaters on June 11th, and the movie, which had a $63 million budget, earned around $50 million over its opening weekend. As we all know, it was a massive hit that made $970 million at the global box office that year. Those are 1993 dollars. Last Action Hero hit the big screen on June 18th and had an opening weekend of just $15.3 million. Just barely enough to cover the $15 million Schwarzenegger had been given to star in the movie. With a budget in the $85 million range, the movie ended up pulling in a total of $137 million at the global box office. Considering the budget, star power, and the money and effort Columbia put into hyping it, it was a total misfire. But the film has found an appreciative audience, and many of its fans are the viewers who were around Danny's age when it was first released. The kids who watched all the same movies he had seen, who were experts on R-rated action flicks before they even reached their teens. When they watched Last Action Hero, they could enjoy seeing someone like them go on an adventure with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and they were still young enough to find some of the sillier humor amusing. For viewers who have been enjoying the movie since the beginning, it now has nostalgia working in its favor as well. But it's also easier for new viewers to enjoy Last Action Hero these days, since we're far removed from the excessive hype, the unmet expectations, and the negativity about the project. Now you can just take it in for what it is. Something that turned out to be a fun piece of entertainment despite all the questionable decisions that went into it. It's not the greatest action movie ever made, it's more like an intriguing curiosity, but it's not a bad way to spend 2 hours, and ranks up there as one of the most expensive cult movies ever made.